The courthouse that morning didn't just feel cold, it felt refrigerated, like someone had opened the doors and let January itself walk in and sit on the benches. The air tasted metallic, old radiators, industrial cleaner, and the faint copper tang of fear nobody wanted to name. Behind me, camera shutters snapped like hungry teeth. Each flash bounced off the polished brass plate bolted to the bench. Honorable Ruth M. O'Connor, my mother's college roommate, her campaign's biggest independent donor, her friend. Across the aisle, Councilwoman Elaine Rivers sat with the kind of stillness that costs thousands of hours in media training. Chin tilted just enough to look noble, eyes soft enough to look wounded, lips pressed into the exact shape of a grieving mother who only wanted what was fair. Beside her, my father Patrick kept his gaze on his shoes, expensive Italian leather that had never once stepped anywhere difficult. He hadn't looked at me since I was 12. Some habits die harder than people. Her attorney, Brian Keller, arranged his exhibits with the lazy arrogance of a man who believed courtrooms were just another stage and the script had already been approved. Then he said it, low enough to sound conversational, loud enough for the microphones to catch every syllable. That girl has never worked a day in her life. She only knows how to waste what she was handed. That girl. Me. Callie Abbott. 26 years old, standing in a navy blazer I bought off the rack, holding the only weapon I needed. The truth in a manila folder thick enough to choke on. The judge gave the smallest tilt of her head, a silent go on. Keller's mouth curved into that smug little half-smile men wear when they think connections weigh more than evidence. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I smiled, because they had no idea I'd spent the last 18 months turning their own footprints into landmines. 2 words. Just 2. That was all it would take to make the entire room realize the floor wasn't as solid as they thought. Judicial conflict. If you've ever been called that girl by the woman who's supposed to love you, if you've ever watched family twist into a weapon aimed straight at your heart, keep watching. Because the second I opened my mouth, everything they spent decades building started to collapse in real time. Smash that like button if you're already angry, type "blood isn't always thicker" in the comments, and subscribe to Shattered Voices, because this isn't just a story about inheritance. This is about what happens when kindness finally learns how to fight back. Welcome to Shattered Voices. Let's begin where everything quiet began to scream. Growing up in Redmond Heights looked perfect from the street. Manicured lawns that never dared have a single weed. Driveways filled with cars that cost more than most people's houses. Smiles that arrived on schedule and left the second the curtains closed. Inside our house, it was different. Love was a currency, and Elaine Rivers was the only bank in town. She doled it out in tiny, calculated doses. A pat on the head for straight A's, a public hug when cameras were rolling, silence the rest of the time. My father existed in the negative space her ambition left behind. He poured scotch like it was oxygen and looked the other way when the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees because Mom was displeased. I learned early, be small, be quiet, be useful. That was the price of staying off her radar. Then there was Grandma Genevieve Abbott. She never asked me to shrink. She walked into rooms like sunlight had decided to take human form. She smelled like cedar closets and lavender sachets and fresh-baked shortbread. Her laugh was too loud for Mom's taste. Her hugs lasted too long. She was everything my mother warned me not to become, and everything I secretly prayed I would. Every Saturday, she took me to the little brick building downtown that housed the Abbott Community Foundation. The walls were covered with Polaroids and graduation photos of kids
who would never have gone to college without her scholarships. She'd point to each picture and tell me their story, like she was reading from a gospel only she could see. "Wealth isn't a crown, Callie," she told me once, fingers sticky with icing from the donuts we weren't supposed to eat before lunch. "It's a toolbox. You either build something with it, or you use it to bury people." I chose building. Mom called it bleeding money on strangers. Grandma called it breathing. They hadn't spoken in the same room without cameras present for 15 years.
When Grandma started losing words, I thought it was normal. 85 is allowed to forget where the car keys are. Then she forgot my mother's name. Then she forgot her own. Alzheimer's doesn't knock. It slips in through the cracks and starts rearranging the furniture of your life while you're still living in it. I was 22 when she sold the mansion on Crestwood Hill and moved into the small lake cottage, painted the color of robin's eggs. I moved in the same week. Mom didn't fight me on it. A live-in caretaker looked better in campaign ads than a nursing home ever could. Those 2 years were the holiest and the hardest of my life. Some nights, she thought I was her little sister Dorothy, who died in 1963. Some mornings, she introduced herself to me, like we were meeting for the first time. But every single day, she reached for my hand with the same soft smile, like her heart never forgot the melody, even when the lyrics were gone. Mom visited exactly 4 times in 2 years, each time with a photographer in tow, each time in a different coat that cost more than the hospice nurse made in a month. The nurses gushed about how elegant she looked. I learned how to smile while something inside me quietly broke in half. The last winter was nothing but snow and silence, and the sound of her breathing getting thinner. One night, I couldn't sleep. I went through her nightstand looking for her favorite lip balm and found the envelope instead. Heavy cream paper, my name written in her shaky late-stage handwriting. "For Callie, open when I'm no longer here to remind you who you are." Inside was a letter that made me sit on the freezing floor and cry without sound. And beneath it, a will. Signed, witnessed, notarized, airtight. Everything. The properties, the investments, the foundation. All of it to me. She ended the letter with one line I've read 1,000 times since. "Kindness has to be protected the same way money is, or the wrong people will spend it all." She died 3 weeks later while I held her hand and hummed the lullabies she used to sing to me. I planned the funeral alone. Mom arrived in head-to-toe Chanel black, delivered a eulogy that should have come with a copyright symbol, and left before the casket was lowered. For 91 days, there was peace. Then the letter from Keller and Associates arrived. That night, the front door opened without a knock. Heels on hardwood like bullets being chambered. Mom walked in, took one look at the legal papers on the kitchen table, and the temperature in the room plummeted. For the first time in my life, I saw the mask slip all the way off. What was underneath wasn't grief. It was fury so cold, it burned. "You think you're keeping what's mine?" Her voice was quiet. Quiet is worse than screaming. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. That was the moment I stopped being her daughter and started being her opponent. If you've ever watched someone you share DMA with decide you're disposable, you already know the war had just been declared. Hit subscribe to Shattered Voices right now, because what she did next turned Redmond Heights into a battlefield and me into the one thing she never expected: unbreakable. Autumn arrived dressed in gold lies. The trees looked forgiving. The headlines didn't.
Daughter blocks grieving mother from family fortune. Questions swirl around sudden inheritance. Local heiress accused of elder manipulation. Every article written like a sympathy card, addressed to her. Dad called once. His voice sounded like it was being strangled by his own tie. Callie, can't we handle this quietly? I said, you taught me quiet, Dad. Look where it got me. Then I hung up. I hired Alicia Grant the next day. She walked into the coffee shop wearing all black like she was attending the funeral of my old life. She didn't offer tissues. She offered strategy. Rule 1, she said, stirring her espresso exactly 3 times. We don't fight with feelings, we fight with paper cuts. 8,000 of them, until they bleed out. The legal letters started arriving in waves. Demand after demand, accusation after accusation, all designed to bury me in stress and legal fees before we ever saw a judge. We answered with color-coded binders. And that's when the name started appearing like a bruise you couldn't stop pressing. Judge Ruth M. O'Connor. At first, I thought, coincidence. Small city, same charity circles. Then Alicia pulled 10 years of campaign finance filings. Donations from Ruth O'Connor to Elaine Rivers for council. Always $499, always $1 under mandatory reporting. Dozens of them. Then the photos. Vacation villas in Napa. Private box seats at the ballet. Matching bracelets from some exclusive charity auction nobody else could get into. Then the smoking gun. A scanned program from 15 years ago. The kickoff fundraiser for Elaine Rivers' very first campaign. Top sponsor tier. Bold print. Honorable Ruth O'Connor and Mr. Thomas O'Connor. The judge hadn't just been Mom's friend. She'd bankrolled the origin story. Grandma's voice echoed in my head. Corruption doesn't march in wearing a black hat, Callie. It shows up in pearls and a smile and asks if you want a glass of Chardonnay. I was looking at the Chardonnay in 4K. If you're screaming at your screen right now because you've seen this movie before in your own family, your own job, your own town, do me a favor. Pause this video for 2 seconds, smash that subscribe button on Shattered Voices, and come right back. Because the evidence I'm about to show you in court, it made a sitting judge forget how to breathe. My apartment stopped being a home and started being a bunker. Walls covered in red yarn and pushpins, timelines that looked like crime scene reconstructions, coffee that went cold because I forgot it existed. Every night I fell asleep to the sound of the printer coughing up another piece of someone else's lies. One night at 3:17 a.m., I found it, the thread that tied the whole spider web together. A forgotten society page photo from 12 years ago. Same floral centerpieces, same guest list, same private venue. 2 different, unrelated events, except the invoices went to the exact same Shell LLC. Alicia looked at the printout, then at me, and said the sentence that changed everything. This isn't influence anymore. This is infrastructure. They hadn't bent the system, they built it, brick by quiet brick, donation by donation, smile by calculated smile. And I was about to light the match. The morning of the hearing, the sky was the color of old nickels. Reporters camped on the courthouse steps like vultures in North Face. Inside, the courtroom smelled like lemon oil and impending doom. Mom sat in the front row, wearing mourning that cost more than most people's rent. Her lawyer oozed rehearsed compassion. The judge ascended the bench like she was doing everyone a favor by showing up. They went first. Hours of it, testimony that painted me as spoiled, unstable, manipulative.
Mom took the stand and cried on cue, perfect single tear tracking down her cheek like she'd practiced in a mirror. Then the judge asked if I had anything to add. I stood up. My knees didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. I didn't make a speech. I made a presentation. Exhibit A through ZZ. Photos, bank records, guest lists, invoices, signatures, timestamps. I laid them out like a deck of cards in the exact order that made the house collapse. When I slid the final photograph across the table, Mom and the judge on a yacht in the Mediterranean, arms around each other, champagne flutes raised, the room went so quiet I could hear my own pulse. The judge's hand twitched. She gave the tiniest involuntary nod when Keller repeated his earlier insult. She's just a girl who never earned any of it. That nod, that microscopic betrayal of muscle memory, that was the moment the entire facade cracked in front of 40 witnesses and 6 live streaming cameras. Alicia stood up, voice like Arctic steel. Your Honor, pursuant to Canon 3 of the Judicial Code of Conduct, we move for immediate recusal due to undeniable personal, financial, and social entanglement with the petitioner that creates both actual conflict and the appearance of impropriety. You could have heard a pin drop on marble. The judge tried to recover, failed. Her ruling came out flat and fast. The will was valid, all claims dismissed. But the damage was done. 2 weeks later, Judge Ruth O'Connor resigned, citing sudden health concerns. 3 days after that, the Judicial Conduct Commission announced a full investigation. Mom's campaign imploded in slow motion. Donors ghosted. Staff quit. Her face disappeared from billboards like someone had pressed delete on her entire existence. I never celebrated. There were no champagne toasts. There was just the quiet sound of a machine that had run on lies, finally running out of fuel. The foundation is mine now. Every scholarship we give out carries Grandma's name. Every kid who walks across a stage because of her money, that's her middle finger to every person who said kindness was weakness. Redmond Heights moved on. They always do. But every time someone Googles Elaine Rivers or Ruth O'Connor, the first result is still the court transcript where a 26-year-old girl with nothing but receipts and grief took down an entire corrupt kingdom. If this story made your blood boil in the best way, if you believe some victories are quiet but still sound like thunder, do 3 things right now. Like this video so the algorithm knows the truth still matters. Comment the word infrastructure if you know exactly what I exposed. Subscribe to Shattered Voices and turn on the bell because there are more stories coming where kindness learns how to fight dirty and wins. I'll see you in the next one. Stay loud. Stay unbroken. This is Shattered Voices, and some things are more powerful when they break.